And away we go. It's just me at the moment. I'm not sure if Eric's going to join, not sure if Frisk is going to join, and not sure if a third person is going to join. Either way, the show must go on. Or if it will allow me, that is. Other than that, let's just jump right into it. Let's see where this will go. Second migrant sent to France returns to the UK. Last Wednesday, the Home Office confirmed another migrant re-entered the UK by small boat after removal to France under the one-in, one-out return deal, and was detained for expedited return. The one-in, one-out pilot scheme with France is intended to deter migrants from crossing the English Channel by small boat. An Iranian man re-entered on October 18th, a month after being removed to France, and was deported again last Wednesday following the returns deal. Downing Street said the detection was evidence of the system working, and the Home Office warned returns are wasting their time and money as officials continue removals. Crossings data showed 94 migrants removed to France and 57 brought to the UK under the deal, despite more than 500 crossings on Saturday. Right. I'm not sure what to think of that. Well, either way, foreigners are still going to come into the UK. They're going to find, well, whatever jobs they're available. And if they're not finding jobs, there's still the hotels that they're staying at, provided by the taxpayer. What is the point of having this system of preventing foreigners from coming into the country? Why people come on boats? Could they not enter the UK or any other countries the legal way? Yeah, there's probably a reason why there's certain measures that needs to be met before anyone enters the UK. Well, look, I have nothing against migrants or foreigners coming into the UK or entering any country, just so long as they make an effort. That it doesn't have to be exact, they don't have to be perfect in understanding the culture, at least have an attempt to have an understanding of the culture of the country they're coming into, and also find some way to contribute to the local community in which they reside in. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else to talk about. Of course, migrants are still going to come in, mostly by small boats, and would a change in government do anything? Not so much. Even if they say we're going to do something about the boats, it won't be enough. I don't think whoever the next government will be would make too much of a commitment or make much of an effort on tackling on migration. I feel like it'll be down to the locals to take it into their own hands. Not that I'm encouraging local people to do that, but if the government isn't going to do anything about the migration, or any of the border patrol people, or someone guarding the shores, then who is going to defend, moderate, and monitor the flow of people coming in and coming out of the country? These are things to consider, regardless of where you stand in this discussion or debate. As US skips climate talks in Brazil, leaders plead for other nations to unite. UN climate negotiations began in Brazil, with leaders urging cooperation and urgency after over 30 years of fighting global warming. André Correia do Lago emphasized that negotiators must unite to work on shared climate goals, stating we must change by choice or face tragedy. The Trump administration is withdrawing from the Paris Agreement again, impacting the international negotiating atmosphere. UN climate chief Simon Stale noted that while the Paris Agreement is effective, action must accelerate, emphasizing that devastating climate damages are happening already. I see. I think every other episode, I always have something to say about climate change. And I do. I've already said enough about climate change. I think something I will say, which I haven't said often, is that maybe I have talked about the environment. I think, and that's the thing, there's a difference between climate change and preserving our environment. I might have said something a couple episodes ago about having different opinions on our environment and the climate. However, I think in recent times, I believe there is going to be a rising concern about climate change, and as in more and more people will have negative or skeptical opinions regarding climate change, and whatever initiatives or research is going towards combating climate change, there's going to be a rising opinions going against that. And wherever you stand on climate change, whilst there are people around the world that are advocating for climate action, how long will that last? Will there any be done about that? Will there any be done? Will there be anything be done about combating damages in our climate? Or will the skeptics rise up, project their opinions on what they believe on climate change being a hoax or a scam, and then eventually, at some point, we just forget all about climate change and we move on with life? There's a rise in transportation. There's also a rise in carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gases. There is a rise in opinions like that in the next few months, maybe next few years, perhaps. However, a rise like that is inevitable. The question is, what will the people do to tackle climate change if you're not going to have governments and world leaders advocating for such reach? FDA reserves. FDA reverses decades-old warning on hormone therapy products for menopause. Earlier this month, the US Food and Drug Administration announced it will remove black box warnings from many menopause and perimenopause hormone therapy drugs after an expert panel convened convened in July. The warning labels originated with the 2002 Women's Health Initiative study that many experts now call flawed, and Dr. Marty Makary criticized the ensuing groupthink among clinicians and researchers. Recent studies show benefits outweigh risks when therapy begins early, and Dr. Marty Makary highlighted that hormone replacement therapy for postmenopausal women need to be started within 10 years of the onset of menopause or perimenopause. And generally, the rule of thumb is not to start it after age 60. Advocates point to potential reductions in cognitive decline and osteoporosis as outcomes, with broader use easing symptoms and preventing osteoporosis affecting 1 in 2 postmenopausal women. Earlier this month, the FDA also approved Lincute, a non-hormonal option, and some clinicians cautioned the FDA's decision did not follow a traditional advisory committee process while medical education on menopause remains limited. Whilst it's important you listen to advice by doctors, clinicians, and other health experts, that is not to say you should just go along with what they say. Don't take anything they say just for granted. It is okay to ask questions about the effects of medication and any potential limitations. It's important you have an understanding for what you're getting yourself into when provided with the medication to combat whatever illness or condition that you or someone you might know possibly have. That I will say. I don't know much about menopause. It's not just the fact I'm not a woman. I'm not sure if I was taught anything about menopause in school. Either way, regardless of what you're going through or how your body works, it's important that you do listen to doctors, clinicians, and other health experts, but also question them if needed. And it's okay to do that. It's important that these doctors, clinicians, and health experts know exactly what is in medication and other prescriptions that they are giving you. Co-op to open new store in North London amid cyber attack recovery. The Co-op is opening 50 new or refurbished stores by Christmas as it recovers from a cyber attack. The cyber attack in April is expected to reduce the Co-op's annual earnings by around £120 million and impacted sales by about £206 million. The Co-op has urged the government to reform business rates to encourage further high street investment as it continues its expansion plans. So even though Co-op has been hit with a cyber attack that has pretty much affected most of its staff's information being leaked somewhere, they're still going ahead with opening new stores somewhere in London. I don't have a problem, and I'm not complaining either, but that is quite the recovery. There is no other business could ever pull off quite a recovery like that. You never know what other problems Co-op would possibly go through and other grocery businesses. However, and hopefully you learn your lesson from the cyber attacks, because it's a dangerous world, especially in this day and age where technology is everywhere. In Arab communities, belly dancing has been a form of artistic expression, entertainment, and a staple of classic Egyptian cinema. Saudi Arabian belly dancers practice their art behind closed doors due to cultural stigma and fears of being seen by family members. Despite reforms under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi society retains deep-seated conservatism regarding activities like belly dancing. More recently, many women around the world have taken it up as a group fitness routine and form of empowering self-expression. We're a conservative society, one participant said. Belly dancing is seen as something sexy, and no family or husband would accept that. Men see you like that. It took AFP months to gain access to the class in Riyadh, a fiercely private affair where identities were strictly guarded. Most of the participants said they feared how their families and friends would react. I wouldn't tell my family out of respect for their dignity. They're elderly. The same participant said on condition of anonymity. It is a reminder of the deep-seated conservatism that still prevails in Saudi Arabia despite a rollback of social strictures in recent times. Chief among the women's concern is that their families will see images of them dancing. Phone use is carefully monitored by the gym staff. Someone might harm me or record me, so there is always fear, one dancer said. Another said she could not tell her father she enjoyed belly dancing, knowing he would never accept it. There are different angles to look at this. On one hand, fair enough. I think for the sake of family dignity, it's important that if they were to do something like that, it's important that their identities are to be kept hidden and a mystery from everyone else. I think this is no different to women doing OnlyFans. OnlyFans models may be making a lot of money, but it comes at a cost of family dignity and reputation being shattered because someone you know is doing OnlyFans. They're selling themselves for money, And that is not good. That is immoral, most people would say. That I understand. On the other hand, for the particular groups of men that do enjoy seeing such belly dances, if they're into that, are these men single or are they already married whilst watching these belly dances? I know polygamy is a thing, but that does not mean I agree with it. So there's so many societal differences that may be acceptable in one country, but in many others, it's seen as primitive and outdated. And it's true. However, to say all traditions are primitive and outdated does not mean they're useful today. And I'm not defending polygamy in any extent, or that men should even enjoy belly dancing regardless of marital status. There's different angles in our society, not just the ones we live in, but the society of other countries, and how they accept certain beliefs and what goes on in this world. And to say that this will be the norm for a very long time, not really. That there is more liberalization over the years in very conservative countries and very Muslim majority countries as well. Whilst most countries are much more restricted in expression and customs than other countries, there is a slow phasing of the societal norms becoming more liberalized and now expression becoming a lot more free in such countries as there are in the Western world. I think what the only thing to do is continue these conversations in hopes that over time, countries in terms of their societal culture would be on equal wavelengths as each other, and that's where we'll start to see progression, collaboration, and harmony in trade. And did I say collaboration? Well, either like that too. And whilst there's going to be people with their differences, and certainly a lot of people will not agree on everything, as the years go by, we'll eventually be on the same wavelength on most things. And when it comes to that point, we can progress together with not just our local communities, but connecting each other's nations with each other nations all over the world. Indonesian names: former president Suharto, a national hero. During National Heroes Day ceremonies at the State Palace, President pra- Prabowo Subianto conferred national hero status on former President Suharto, one of 10 honorees. The president's spokesperson, Prasetyo Hadi, said 49 nominees were submitted late on Sunday, with Culture Minister Fadli Zon asserting all met the criteria. Historians say about 300,000 people were killed during the 1965-66 purge, while around 500 civil society members, activists, and academics urged a veto, and protesters near the presidential palace numbered around 100. The Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation called the decision unethical, destructive to law and human rights, and protesters carried slogans like "Stop the whitewashing" during planned demonstrations. Observers say the decision reflects a wider official revisionism that recasts the New Order period as stable and labels Suharto Bapak Pembangunan, while Prabowo Subianto's administration authorizes school history textbooks rewrites and the military's increased role since October 2024 fuels reformasi rollback concerns. Well, the impression I get from Prabowo Subianto is probably not a very good president of Indonesia from the seams of things. And trying to rewrite history to fit your narrative, whatever the narrative that might be, that's not a good look. It doesn't, and even if people don't know about it, someone in the next few years or in the next decade, someone is going to find out. Any of the descendants of that person that's attempting to rewrite history to fit a certain narrative, there's going to be embarrassment. There's going to be tons of embarrassment for those descendants of the person trying to rewrite history. As for the protesters, whatever the people say, it goes. And whilst, again, there'll be different opinions on what the people view this protest, I know that if there is any kind of authoritarian rise, and if there's any measures put on people that limits any of their movements or any freedom of their speech, not saying that's the problem, but just making a point that if there's any protest that goes against any government administration for any reasons to cling on to powers they currently have or to pass anything that they know that won't be popular with lots of people, that alone should be very telling to a lot of people. I don't know how you can go against people speaking out on such issues like this or defend people in power that tries to put forward something that goes against most people's interests. And even though the argument can be made that most people don't know what's in their own interest, it's important that we have there's an understanding of how people live their lives and what's needed to continue and what's needed for tackling whatever issues that a country is going through. And if the current issues going on is authority, security, something's up. You know there's a problem if one of the two is one of the primary issues going on in a country. I'll leave it at that. There's not much I know on this story, but I know that whatever protesters are protesting, it will be in the favor of most. It will go in favor of the people in the end. Again, people will have opinions on that. However, you can never rely or trust your own government, because if you do, you're going to let them trample all over you, and you're also going to allow them to do whatever they want, even if it does go severely against your own interests. Bezos' Blue Origin postponed New Glenn rocket launch due to weather. On Sunday, November 9th, 2025, Blue Origin postponed the second New Glenn flight, calling off the attempt around 1 p.m. as the window closed and scheduling the next launch no earlier than November 12th between 2 p.m. and 4:17 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. Bad weather and a pad fault forced repeated holds during the launch window as rain, a ground system issue, cumulus cloud rule restrictions, and the Carnival Vista cruise ship delayed mission managers at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida. The mission carried NASA's twin Escapade probes headed for Mars, doubling as a key test of New Glenn's first-stage booster recovery and reusability ambitions. The FAA's emergency order restricting daytime launches took effect on November 10th, limiting commercial launches to off-peak nighttime hours and complicating Blue Origin's daytime launch exemption request. The delay heightens competition with Elon Musk's SpaceX as Blue Origin seeks momentum. A successful second flight would help clear a $10 billion backlog and improve New Glenn's deep space capability. To say that there's going to be limitations on when you can launch a rocket into space, That's pretty convenient. That's pretty smart. If you're working in the industry of trying to fool people to thinking that space is not real, I'm not saying that's the case. But if there are people that's trying to play a narrative that say that you can't go into space, we're trapped by the firmament, there's no other life forms outside of our planet, to say that agencies or people that want to do launch testing, but they're only limited to nighttime or particular times throughout the day or throughout the year, that's a pretty good excuse. A very good excuse. Even with time frames, even with limitation of launch time frames, that isn't going to convince people otherwise about what we think of space. I want to see what space is like. I want to see space exploration be a thing. However, until there are people that are willing to go into that rocket because they want to, they go out of space and then go to the moon or Mars or whatever nearby planet that we could provide life for, I'm not particularly fully bought into space exploration or anything space related. It's fascinating learning about the planets in our solar system and supernovas and the expansion of our universe. It's a grey area talking about space because you don't know how successful space missions could be, as well as the survival of the crew that goes into these rockets going into space, at least outside of those that are trying to enter the International Space Station. That we know that people are going into the International Space Station. Then again, there's a separate story. But hey, I'll give them that one. Even if it's regardless of factuality. I'll give them that. For now. Otherwise, I'm not just I just want to see what space is like. I don't want to I don't want to be too skeptical. I don't want to crush anyone's dreams of going into space. But sometimes we need to ask ourselves, is it possible? When is it going to be possible that we could go into outer space and explore planets? Go to other universes if there are any. If it's feasibly possible, one can hope. Bank of England confirms plans for temporary stablecoin holding limits. On Monday, the Bank of England proposed temporary limits on stablecoin holdings, suggesting a cap of 20,000 for individuals to maintain stability during digital finance shifts, 2,000 being equivalent to $26,370. Sarah Breeden said recently that limits were needed to curb risks destabilizing the commercial banking sector, with urgency growing after the Terra stablecoin collapse wiped out $40 billion in investors' money. The Bank of England proposed that stablecoin issuers hold up to 60% of backing in short-term UK government debt, with the rest in unremunerated Bank of England accounts. The consultation runs until February 10th and invites feedback, while cryptocurrency groups branded the limits unworkable and noted possible exemptions for crypto exchanges and supermarkets. Breeden said the proposals pave the way for implementing a stablecoin regime next year, and the bank is considering central bank liquidity agreement arrangements aligned with international regulatory safeguards. Now, imagine the same measures put into fiat money. Like, there is a limit on how much money, whether it be on our debit cards, credit cards, or even physical money. If the same measures, what's been done with crypto stable coins, are to be put in place, if that was to be done now, with all money that exists commercially, how's that going to work? Would the limit prevent people from spending particular spending money on particular necessities? Probably not, because why would you spend 2,000, 20,000 pounds on on essential necessities? Unless you're a millionaire, then that's possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. Whilst there will be people giving praise on limitations on cryptocurrencies, who's not to say that the same measures could also be done on national currencies? It could happen. Cryptocurrencies is just the start because A, not many people are using crypto, as it's not particularly mainstream with a lot of people, nor it is widely used. And B, for those who do use crypto, there are people bringing up problems about scammers using crypto as to hide their identity or get the bag out of the way and run off with financial prosperity, or however people phrase it. I think it comes back to the Online Safety Act. Whilst people, whilst the UK government at the time said that the Online Safety Act was to ensure that children were not supposed to see explicit content that they are not supposed to see. The question is, was this about the children, or is there a bigger question to it? They haven't said people regarding the stuff on regarding the Online Safety Act. There hasn't been much said about the Online Safety Act beyond protecting children from seeing explicit content. Who's not to say that the Online Safety Act could also apply to other sites that may not be a concern to children, but may contain information that is in itself explicit and people should not see? That's a problem. And limits on crypto and or just money in general, having particular holding limits is no different. Whilst Bank of England is confirming plans on cryptocurrency and stablecoin holding limits, don't think this will only apply to crypto. This could also happen to UK to British pounds as well. If they rise a particular concern that particular rich people are spending way too much money, or maybe middle class or working people are spending too much money on something that they don't need. So therefore, we have to put holding limits to ensure that you only use your money to spend on essential goods and necessities. I'm just saying, that's one path to go down. I don't think we'd ever go down that path. I hope. However, if there are radical or drastic issues that may potentially push such measure like that to happen, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Because seeing how people migrating to Western world nations, people in Western world nations are saying that there's too much immigrations and too much foreigners coming into our country, and then the government announced that we should do digital IDs to ensure that we identify who is who. Are you a foreigner that has followed the legal procedure, or have you came here illegally, or so we should send you back to wherever it is you came from? There's so much that could be misinterpreted from that. So much. And I wouldn't put it past people to take any of that information the wrong way and make it out as something completely different that really actually limits our our movements in our communities and nations, and also adhere us to particular laws that at best doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Anyway, I'm going on a bit of a tangent with this story about Bank of England confirming stablecoin holding limits. But yeah, there's a lot to think about. It may not happen soon. However, if anything related to finance was to come about and it does raise a concern, someone is likely going to put measures to prevent such issues from ever happening, even though such issues like that would never happen so commonly like people are saying it would happen. Like, you will never see such problems happen again the moment such measures are put in place to say that the reason these measures are put in place is to prevent these such events from happening, which never happened so often to begin with. So yeah, there's that. Sean Diddy Combs, representatives denied reports claiming he drank homemade alcohol in prison. TMZ reported that Combs, incarcerated at Federal Correctional Institution Fort Dix, was allegedly caught with a fermented mixture of Fanta, sugar, and apples, which his spokesperson called completely false. A spokesperson for Combs emphasized that he has not violated any prison rules and is focusing on sobriety and self-discipline. Combs is serving a 4-year sentence for 2 prostitution-related convictions and was transferred to FCI Fort Dix after over a year in the Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Center. Alright, firstly, how is it possible for anyone in prison to make alcohol? Wouldn't there be guards just watching these prisoners 24/7 to ensure they're not doing anything? Not that I'm defending P. Diddy, I'm just saying, if he's actually made alcohol in prison, we would have known that by now. Like the moment he actually transferred to the Fort Dix detention center. But hey, if this is true, I'll give Diddy credit for actually being able to make alcohol with Fanta, sugar, and apples. That's quite impressive. It's not much, but it's something. Otherwise, unless there's rules about making alcohol and the guards should have noticed it right away, I'm not sure how that is the case in the slightest. But again, if this is true, then fair enough. I'll give him some kind of credit just for that alone. But that doesn't make him any better of a person. He has done many things that are very questionable. No one should forget that. And that's that. So, I was scrolling on Facebook and I came across a post by Create Streets that shows 2 pictures. One showing a train station in the UK, as it currently is, which is completely soulless, lots of metal, barricade, whatever you call it. And the caption reads, "This is a recently completed British train station. It is pathetic, value engineered to a level of comatose ugliness that dispirits and dulls the mind, dissuading passengers and degrading the trains that run through it. It is not civic or sociable architecture." And then the next picture shows a Twitter X post by Matthew J. Dolby showing a picture of what seems to be the same station in Britain, but the architecture looks, there's a lot more detail, there's more brickwork, and looks very gorgeous, I'd say. And the caption reads, "I had a go at improving it, and I'd say that's a great improvement." Why? I don't get why people are building architecture, train stations, or buildings that it doesn't add anything. It's just flat and sheets of metal all over the place. Like, I agree. Absolutely dispirits and dulls our minds. Other than cutting on costs of construction, what's the point of building such architecture that just doesn't have much depth or detail whatsoever? In fact, I've actually watched a YouTube video about asking the question, does it cost less to build traditional architecture? And the answer is mostly yes. It's not a big difference to modern architecture, but it's slightly cheaper than whatever construction projects are being done today. And the thing is, and you need to think about this carefully. How is it that when you look at a map about most photographed places around the world, there is so much photos across Europe, and compared to particular cities around the world, besides cities with hundreds of millions of people, where they're likely to get so many tourists, there's tons, there's so many tourists, at least compared to a city's population in Europe, that visit countries' capitals or other cities or towns where it preserves its architecture that was built somewhere in the mid to early, what do I call it? First century, at least architecture that was built around 1000 something to 1800 something. How is it that such buildings that was built during that time period, preserved in such cities across Europe, there is higher numbers in tourists compared to to native populations of said towns and cities in Europe, vastly outnumbers compared to other cities outside of Europe, mostly cities that has tens, if not hundreds of millions of people living in said cities. I'm just saying, if people are not coming to your city to observe the beauty of the buildings or any history relating to the city, any around the world, what's the point of going to that city or town on holiday to begin with? That's really something to think about, and it is something that anyone working in architecture or tourism should take note on. Because whilst we move forward with society in innovation and technology, why should architecture be the same? It baffles me that people would approve construction projects of buildings or skyscrapers that doesn't add anything besides being a glass stick or just a glass block or just pieces of metal on top as a facade. It doesn't make sense. Well, other than cutting on costs, that should not be the only goal. I think there's a lot of people that speak about modernist architecture and how, not just how ugly it is, but how it affects people mentally. Like, there is a mental impact with architecture. Like, it affects how people may, it mostly affects how people think or how people feel, regardless of whatever emotions they're feeling. There is a point and case to be made on that. That's something to say. And that is it for the episode.